little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Thank you very much for coming on up. Thank you for playing Follow the Leader with me. Follow. Following, followers. That is the trajectory that we are invited into today. Starts with the kids. If we are going to be followers, we've got to be willing to keep our eyes on the leader, and we've got to be able to submit our will to the leader's will. We've got to submit what we want and our own self for the sake of the places that Christ invites us and calls us and empowers us to go. So, all three readings today help us head that direction, and we're going to start with Luke. Luke tells us that Jesus' face is set towards Jerusalem. Now, in the Bible, that is insider talk for much more than Jerusalem. It means that Jesus' face is set towards the denial and the betrayal and a trumped-up trial and crucifixion and death and burial. When we hear that Jesus' face is set towards Jerusalem, it's that whole mix of what it means, of everything that's going to transpire when he gets to Jerusalem. Jesus' face is set towards Jerusalem, and nothing is going to detour him. Nothing. In fact, it says he stops in the Samaritan town and they will not receive him because his face was set towards Jerusalem. He is of a singular call. He sees one thing, he's got one goal, and that goal are the events that are going to transpire in Jerusalem. So as his face is set towards Jerusalem, we have this variety of encounters that happen. And as we read this variety of encounters, it's really hard to figure out what's going on. One man wants to go back and bury his father. Another one wants to go say goodbye to his family. Those seem like reasonable expectations, do they not? Of course they do. But Jesus' face is set towards Jerusalem. There is nothing else now. All there is this one single vision, this one single thing. It's radical. And that's part of what it means to follow Jesus, is to be able to be focused on Jesus, the radical Jesus, not easy. The kids nailed it. Of course it's not easy. Of course it's not easy, especially as Jesus embodies it. His face is set towards Jerusalem, and everything else needs to fall away. The excuses need to fall away. All the things that take our attention elsewhere. That's the pure and the clear and the simple follow. St. Paul helps us to fill that out. St. Paul starts the reading that we had today talking about a spirit of freedom or a yoke of slavery. And to help make his point, he gives us two different lists. And the first list is about the flesh stuff, the stuff that we are enslaved to, like anger and greed, all those things that are about me and my vision and how I see the world and how I see the world not being safe. And those are the very places that we get stuck. And St. Paul says, as long as you're in those places, you are not living out the kingdom. Those are not healthy places. Those are not places that are full of life. Those are stuck places. Those are dead-end places. Those are places that hurt. When we are there, we are not living the life that God has called us to and prepared for us and desires to pour it out over us. So there's a second list. The gifts of the Spirit. The things, the ways that God desires to pour out into and through and around our lives. And those aren't self-serving things. Those are the ways that we love others. We serve our neighbors. Those are the path to life. Now, St. Paul talks about a spirit of freedom and a yoke of slavery. And St. Paul goes on to make it very clear that we will be slaves to something. We will have a leader, and we will follow. The question is, what will we follow? Will we follow the flesh? Will we follow our own desires? Or, as we are empowered and called and led by the Spirit, will we walk in that way of life? The Old Testament also gives us a story. It's the story of Elijah and Elisha. Elijah was the great Old Testament prophet. And he comes along today, and there's this bizarre exchange, a mantle, and then this conversation, and that's all for another day, because the two things I want you to be aware of as we think about follow me today. First of all, from where does Elisha's call come? It does not come from Elisha. The call is given to him. Elijah comes along and does this whole mantle thing. Now, what's very intriguing is Elisha's response. Elisha slaughters the oxen. He burns the oxen. He burns the farm equipment. For Elisha, there is going to be no going back. The man is not going to be a farmer anymore because his equipment is gone. It's what Jesus is talking about in the gospel, that we can't look back. Following the leader isn't about looking back, it's about looking forward. And it's exactly what Elisha does. He gets the call, he steps into the call by creating a way of not being able to go back. It's an interesting day to get these readings, in my opinion, because today is the day that we gather to do the business of this church. Today is our annual meeting. And today we are going to sit with three huge things on our list, our agenda. And as we think about those ways, I think some huge questions have to be wrestled with in terms of following. Do we believe this is Christ's church? Do we believe that Christ is active here and now in this place? Do we believe that Christ has a future for this church? And what does that look like? And how we enter into those questions will determine who we continue to be as a church, how we follow the one who has called to us. On the agenda today are these three items. We will vote on a budget. Budget numbers, you know how I feel about that. But budget and numbers in a church are about ministry. How are we going to do ministry in this town and in this place and in this community? How are we going to live out the follow me? Another item that will be on the agenda are the three houses that sit over here. It was a vision for ministry from many years ago. And the houses were bought, but the vision never managed to get the money, the backing, to become the retirement facility that the vision held. I don't know how many years. They've been rentals They've been rentals. So today, one of the questions we have to ask is it time to let go of that vision? And what does the next vision look like? Third really important item that we get to wrestle with today is youth and family ministry. I don't think there's a person in this place that doesn't think youth and family ministry is part of the future of what it means to be Immanuel Lutheran in Silverton, Oregon. But what does it look like? You know, Elijah and Jesus are talking about you can't look back over your shoulder, because when you're plowing and you look back over your shoulder, you're not going to end up where you need to be in the field. As a kid, I drove combine in our family of origin, and in grass seed it really didn't matter, but in wheat, you were supposed to be looking way out there so you could keep your combine straight. Well, I liked watching the wheat go in, so I looked right down, and my rows always looked like that. You can't look back, and you can't even necessarily look right at your feet. You've got to look out. So what does this youth and family ministry look like? I haven't a clue. But what I can tell you is we can't look over our shoulder to figure it out. It's out there. It's out there. Yesterday afternoon, the kids and I grabbed our flotational devices, and we hiked up the road, and we got into Silver Creek. It was a beautiful day to float the creek. It was nearly 90 degrees, and the water was low, and it wasn't rushing too badly. But even so, as soon as we got into that creek took us where it was going to take us. We had to follow its trajectory. And depending on which stream you got into, depending on which rocks you bumped into, how badly you bottomed out. Going in the stream meant that two of them toppled into the water, going over the little falls. I lost my glasses. When we got into the stream, we had to submit to its leadership. And it did mean that there were some bumps and some bruises, and some things got left behind, including my glasses. Being followers of Christ is a bit like getting in the stream. We can fight, and we can paddle, and we can do whatever, but Christ isn't going that direction. Christ is going that direction. So what does it mean as individuals, and what does it mean as a community to follow? And depending on how we answer that as individuals and as a community will depend on what it means, how we respond to those two simple words. Follow me.
Well,